I read somewhere today, I'm not sure where, that you said, I like to talk about the genesis of films, how it started, where the idea came from, and I read somewhere that you said it actually started with the place. Could you explain that?
Sure.
Is that true?
No, absolutely. Completely true. So the thing is, I mean, usually with my work, I usually don't start with the story. I tend to kind of leave the story to spontaneously arise out of other explorations. So it might be a place, it might be certain people, or some kind of seed that's usually not the narrative. And that I find leads to narratives that are far more authentic, or like rooted in a thought that's something else. But having that as an approach, why we shot in this particular place is because my co-writer, who wrote the film with me, he was born and brought up in that village. And I've known him for 15 years. So we had a wonderful relationship, and I went to see his village for the first time about 5 years ago, and I'd made some short films. I was ready to attempt a feature, and I said, you know, you want to try doing something here? It was very spontaneous, and we were just walking around. He's like, yeah, sure, why not? And we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into back then. You know, that was 5 years ago, and then we started working on it 3 years ago, and this is what happened.
So now, and you said that most of the cast certainly are farmers or people from this area, from this village.
Right.
And so did you then, when you started to develop the story, did you develop it with them or just sort of use the place and the people as sort of inspiration?
So, no, the story was not developed with them in terms of their intellectual involvement, but it was developed with them in the sense that we did a pretty we did a brainstorm that lasted about 2-3 months, where we actually just interacted with the village, again, without having a narrative set. So we didn't want to tie ourselves down. We wanted to explore it threadbare. So we actually, we roamed around, we found interesting people, places, events. For example, the storytelling scene that the film ends with is something that I saw on the first night of that exploratory period. We drove into the village, and sitting on the side of the village was this bored storytelling band. And I asked my co-writer who are they, and he's like, they're a band, and they usually come, and like 11 days after somebody dies, they perform this for the, you know, for the household, usually for the family where they pass. So that first night, the first night I was doing that exploration, I saw the storytelling, which ended up being the last, you know, the last part of the film. In the beginning of the film, they're picking sand out of a river. In exploring, I went, you know, one morning, and I actually sat in a bullock cart, not knowing where I was going to go, and with those boys, and we suddenly ended up going, and I thought they'll stop before we get into the river, but they just went all the way into the river, started lifting sand. So a lot of stimulation like this made itself into a brainstorm, which eventually came into the script. So in that way, yes, they were involved, but not intellectually.
Not, yes, to go tell the story. But I'm showing my naivete about parts of the world, and certainly India and some of these areas. But do different areas really have sort of different customs, and do they differ very much from other areas? So this was very specific to these people in this place.
Yes, it was specific to that area. The dialect is very specific. And it's spoken in one belt in that area. So we have like 300 languages in India, right? So that's the kind of cultural diversity that there is, even in terms of customs and in terms of, in certain places you drive a few kilometers and you have a new culture. You drive a few more and it's changing. So it's that kaleidoscopic as a country. It's very, you know, fascinatingly diverse. So this was very culturally specific to there in terms of like particular things that they do in the Thithi, etc. But a lot of the larger sort of, you know, things are quite acultural because they're familial, and it, you know, it's about the generations and stuff.
All right, let's see if anybody here has any questions. Yes, right there.
Just to elaborate on the question of whether films are on.
Could you speak up a little bit, please? Thank you.
When it came to casting, I mean, you sort of just touched on this, but did you sort of write the script with the characters in mind and the people? I mean, because they were non-professional and they were from this village, presumably, or from the area, did you write it with them in mind, or how did you sort of cast?
So this is a question sort of about casting and also sort of about writing, which I think most people heard of, but I'll just sort of recap, which is that when you wrote the script and wrote the stories, did you write it with some of those particular individuals in mind?
Yeah, no, that's a very pertinent question because when we decided to make a film with these people, we had to like kind of backward engineer what are the best ways to do that. And one of the biggest challenges where we wanted to write a narrative film that has fairly complex roles. So one of the ways we tried to do that was we did cast 3 main actors before we wrote, and that was part of that exploratory period where we did not have the story in mind, but we were just magnetically pulled to these characters. The first character that was cast is Gadappa, the bearded guy, because I fell in love with him as soon as I met him. And so I wanted to build a story around him, and that was just way before we had any idea of making a film around a death or anything like that. And then we found his son, and then his son. So we got to know them in that exploratory period, and we wrote roles that we thought they could pull off. So for example, the father character, he's chasing land. In real life, he's chasing land in a similar way, right? The son character is, chasing girls. In real life, he's chasing girls or getting drunk or gambling. So that was all very true to their personalities. And Gadappa is not exactly the kind he is on the script. This is like a sort of cinematic air to his real character, but he's also a wonderfully genuine and sweet person. And his simplicity is definitely, one of the inspirations for the way we constructed the script, like having everyone crazy and this one really simple character in the midst of it all. But then after that, once we wrote, we had about 100 roles. So after the 3 main roles, we had to cast the rest, which was insane. It was a crazy process, took 8 months long, with me and my casting director, also the co-writer, just both of us roaming around in a Jeep all over the villages for months.
And you also have a bunch of extras sort of listed here in the credits. I have a feeling it's truly like everyone seemed to be involved in this.
Yeah, it became quite like the production was spread across 1 or 2 villages, and we've been around so long that, it became quite collectivized in terms of their involvement. So a lot of them, like I go back there and I feel like I'm in some, they've all become stars to me because I've been sitting in the edit room for like a year looking at all their faces, and I just go back to the village, they're all walking by with their cycles or with their cows, and I'm like, hey, these are my heroes. So.
And they're your stars now. I thought there was right there, yes. The story that the grandfather tells about the death of his wife and one of the sons, is that rooted in reality or someone's story?
No, that's mostly fictional. That's mostly for the script. However, his wife did pass away at a younger age, so there is that slight truth in it, but that's about it. The rest of it is fictional, and it's something we thought lent the narrative a lot of layers. Although it's a brief moment, there are complexities that come in through that story. We don't know if he's actually the father or the half brother, or it gets quite complex. So that's something we wrote. For his roaming, yeah.
Oh, right. You said it seemed to be true motivation for his roaming. Well, yes, that's interesting. What we get from these, when you worked with the actors, though, I mean, because that's interesting what you asked, and I wonder. Then you wrote a script, but how much leeway was there in the script as you were shooting it with these people? And did they have ideas? Did you expand on anything, or was it very strictly according to your script?
No, it was very strictly according to the script because it was like it was a sprawling screenplay of 160 pages with 100 characters, and if we left things up to chance, there was this risk.
We still wouldn't be watching it; it wouldn't be done yet.
Right. There was this risk of it becoming loose. Yeah. So it was very controlled. The lines were very specific. There's almost zero improvisation. Also, the scene lengths had to be a certain length. So the rhythm was very important for me, especially because there's so many characters, so many scenes. So I wanted it to actually feel very rhythmically natural and things like that. So yeah, it was very controlled on set, and that's why it was quite a long shooting process. To get this kind of level of control from non-professionals was a big challenge.
Challenge that was well met. Yes.
Thanks a lot for the film. I really extremely liked it.
Thank you.
What was the reception of the film when you showed it, if you showed it in the village?
He's now asked all the questions. No, I'm joshing you. I'm going to try to very quickly. So, how many shooting days, and also talk about a rehearsal process with all these people and this story, and then the other one.
Inspirations.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, and inspirations, and.
Reception.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. See, and then I forgot it all. And the reception of the film.
It's like one
We'll
of those
get to- we'll get
games,
to the
right? Where you
last
have to
one.
like
Yeah.
remember all the things
Let's
that the
let's
next
get to
person
the
says.
last one a little bit later, because there are a couple of different
All right,
receptions we'll talk about.
I'll try and go through them. So, the shoot was quite long, but we took breaks. It was about 100 shooting days, with breaks spread over 5 months. That was a fairly straightforward answer. What was the second question?
The second question. Oh, then
Rehearsal
we have
process. Yes, rehearsal process.
rehearsals.
Right. So the rehearsal process, interestingly and unfortunately for us, is that they were not really serious enough to rehearse. So they wouldn't rehearse off set. So unfortunately, they rehearse on set. On set meaning while we were shooting. So.
So that
they
is
don't,
no
they don't
rehearsal.
really know their lines, and that was why it took that long to shoot. Not really because they were bad actors, because we did pick people who were fairly talented. They just didn't know their lines, and that was excruciating, especially for the crew. Imagine the boom guy, like just standing there when they're just stuttering and don't know a single word, and he's like, "Why am I like capturing this audio?" The camera guy just like all handheld. But so that was one of the biggest challenges. So the first 5, 6, 7, 8 takes are rehearsals, sort of. Like they're not, but they needed the seriousness of like 20 people around them to actually focus, get their lines down. Once they got their lines down, then we started with the real takes. So that was our rehearsal process during takes. So we ended up doing a fair amount of takes with particular actors especially. So that's why the longevity of the shoot. That's with the rehearsal process.
Let me just stick in there though. That's amazing when you say it took all this time because they weren't really serious and they didn't know their lines. But what you wound up with is just really amazing. Amazing, given that.
It'll be interesting for you to for anyone to see our rushes because they're terrible. So bad. I went back to seeing our rushes to do some dubs from the takes. After the film was edited, and I was so proud of us. And John Zimmerman, my editor, sitting there somewhere. Bravo. Where is he?
Raise
there
your
he
hand.
is.
There he is.
Yay, John. so I mean, I think a lot of this film was made in the edit room. A lot of the performances were crafted in the edit room, and I knew also on set that I was never going to get seamless performances. So there was a lot of editing on set. And a lot of nursing of the footage. Like if you'd asked John, we had the conversation scenes were like nightmares to cut. Because again, they didn't know their lines. So to me, like we'd get one line and like, poor guy, he wanted to like stay on a shot, but he couldn't, we had to cut. So some places, if it's, like there are more cuts than I would have personally liked, but we made it work. So that's kind of the whole rehearsal thing. Inspiration, wow.
Who are your inspirations?
I mean, so I don't really have inspirations from Indian cinema. I haven't seen too much of it. I'm kind of new to cinema because I started wanting to be a filmmaker around 20, and before that I hadn't seen that much. So I watched a lot of world cinema when I entered filmmaking. I think the first thing that kind of opened my mind to world cinema was Iranian films, just for the seriousness and command over form and the variety of how they use cinema as a medium, especially being a country from the East, that resonated. Films from Turkey as well resonated in that early period. And then there were films from Eastern Europe that were quite interesting because, again, they're working with like rural settings and things like that. Again, that kind of could be applied to India. I didn't learn too much from the West because the worlds are so different in terms of, for this particular film, the worlds are so different. However, from the West, one of my biggest influences was the television series The Wire, for kind of for the way it sort of captures a community. Also, the short scenes, the way they're edited, the floating point of view, the way the film comes together, the whole show comes together so realistically, and you feel like you're actually just watching society function. So I wanted to become a floating point of view, slightly more stylized, and slightly more whimsical, but a floating point of view to watch this village sort of functioning. And we borrowed little bits from like Coen Brothers, Wes Anderson, for like certain elements of humor, things like that. Also, there's a film, The Band's Visit, that I really enjoyed. Also, because of the very particular style of humor. So we wanted to find our own style of humor in Thithi, putting all these things together. Reception, whoa. That was the last question.
Yes. So how was it? Well, how was the film received? And I guess we're going to say, how was it received? It's been in film festivals, but has it been shown in India?
Yeah, right. So you asked about the reception in the village. It was so interestingly, the film for me is it's quite gratifying. It's quite a chameleon of a film in that it resonates with people all over and makes people sort of people are enjoying it all over. Like as a as a comedy. We never meant to make a comedy. We meant to make a sort of a warm film, but it's become a comedy organically. And that's been really rewarding. So people are laughing. People are laughing at different places, possibly. Where the Europeans laughed in Locarno might be slightly different from where the villagers laughed, because they're getting different humor out of it. But there's intrinsic humor, both visual, both spoken, narrative, that we tried to do on several levels. And depending on the audience, they connected with a different piece of that. So in the village itself, they were pretty. It was kind of like, it was partially a mirror to their own existence, which is rare because in India it's usually escapism. Like films are way different from reality, but this was reality. And they also found like the way things happen, like they were so realistic yet so sort of cinematic that they really enjoyed the way it happened. They really enjoyed some of the lines, that nuances that don't come through subtitles, things like that.
And they had their own bit of comedy. See, we got through all those questions, and they were very good questions. So I'm glad you asked them. I'm sorry. Over here, then we'll go up there. Yes, sorry.
Can you tell us something about your development as a filmmaker? Did you go to film school? And also, what other types of future productions are you working on, or do you have in mind?
Well, we don't want to put pressure on you about the future, but we'll ask you that anyway. And yeah, talk about, you talked about not getting into film until almost 20, and you went to film school, yes?
Yes. So I started out making a lot of short films on my own, and that's when I decided I was quite happy to be a filmmaker. Before that, I was into poetry, into photography, into writing, and I'd written a novel and poetry, photography, and like music and sound. And these were the things I really liked, and I was trying to figure out what to focus on. And then I found film that integrated all of them, so that was really exciting for me, that I didn't have to give up on one and have to focus on only one and not all of them. That's when I decided film. Then I made a bunch of short films by myself. I was in a sort of dilemma whether to go to film school or not, because I really wanted to stay original with visions, and I didn't want to sort of be colored by a certain ethos of teaching or things like that. But then I found an answer in Prague Film School, which is a very short course in Prague, which was just 9 months. So it really gave me a lot of technical confidence, a lot of practice, and I got to network. I met my editor there, my DOP. I got to network really well. So that was really useful to bring that back, that technical confidence and the networking, because that really helped Thithi happen. So that's in terms of educational sort of process and
it got you
qualifications.
here, and it's a really good film school in Prague. So yeah, so you guys are good. And so, I mean, do you have other ideas right now? Are you working on something, or right now are you just working with this?
No, I'm
film and
working on
taking it around?
something. I am working on something as of quite recently, but it's something I'm really excited about. It's not yet really completely formed, so it's hard to say. But it's going to be very different from Thithi, and I kind of come a little bit more from like the Angli school of thought, where every film is different and unique in its own right. Yeah. So I would like to make every film original and keep a sort of originality of voice in some way, but I would like to play with cinema as a medium, because otherwise I think I'd get quite bored. So I get bored easily. That's why I wanted something that integrated so many things. So this is so dynamic, and so to move from film to film and explore each film fresh is one of the most exciting things I think about film. So I think it's going to be very different, and I'm I'm kind of deciding whether to work with non-professionals again, but because it was wonderfully gratifying, but also a nightmare in some ways. So I think I'm quite ready to work with professionals possibly in the next project, and so let's see how that goes.
It's like some people say it was a challenge, but no, you're right out there going, no, some parts are a nightmare. But I would say, from what you're saying and how you want to work, that we may not always recognize it. When you have a whole body of work, we may not always recognize your work because you're always going to sort of be changing things around, it seems.
I think I have like my own stamp, but not really in the larger form. So it's not like Abbas Kiarostami where all his films are quite slow and observational. But I think like I'm very interested in magic realism elements, and it hasn't really come through in this film, but it came through in all my short works. My novel was magic realism. So to integrate that within cinema, but in different ways, like maybe sometimes more serious, sometimes more playful. But there's also a kind of spirituality in the East that I've grown up with, and I'm very keen on keeping in all my work. So I think that will be the common thread, that spirituality, those elements of magic realism. But the larger form, that's something I'm quite excited to play with.
And so someone, I hope that person didn't leave who had a question back there. Oops. Or maybe it was the same question as answered. No, they went away. Okay. Well, I think that's all right, because I think that actually does about take up all our time. But I did want to suggest to you, because as I was looking at this film, I'm thinking of almost, not really, but in some ways almost French farce about hiding people away and this and the other thing. And then I'm thinking about French comedies, and I'm thinking Day for Night, and I'm going, I think a really good film would be a film about the making of this film, which would be another kind of comedy.
I often joke that the making of would have been far better than the film itself. Unfortunately,
I don't know if it would be far better, but it would have been certainly something very entertaining.
I know, we didn't have a making of. I mean, we were so serious on set. Like, I couldn't afford, the luxury of having someone like recording all our nightmares. Like, we had to just get through the nightmare. So maybe I'll have a making of Filmmaker the next time. But as first-time filmmakers, we just wanted to get it right. So, but yeah.
Well, as a first-time filmmaker, believe me, you really got it right. It was so entertaining. It was so lovely, because also we see real beautiful things of this village. I think the women who was running around to have to get the water from far away, we know these are problems like all over the place. So within all the comedy, you see, real people and their lives. I thought it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank
Raam.
you. Thank you.
Thank
all
you,
for staying.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Good night.
That was great.